Mark is the founder of Cargo Publishing. Due to Mark's passion and vision, Cargo has become one of Scotland's leading indie publishers. Cargo won Best Newcomers at the List Magazine Awards in 2011 and are now the official publishers of the Dundee Book Prize. Cargo is run by young people and has reinvigorated the Scottish literature scene. Mark is a truly remarkable young person and a positive example of young people making a lasting impact in Scotland.
Cargo began from, it was a series of club nights originally in Glasgow, and that grew once I finished university into a publishing house. And it's, as always people tell me, the smartest thing to do during the recession with bookshops closing around us was to clearly start a publishing company. And from there it's gathered pace, and over the last few years we've built a really good team, great roster of authors, and we're publishing across the UK and now further afield into the States. I was inspired to get into publishing because I love books. I love telling stories, and I think Scotland has a great tradition of writing and reading and telling important stories that the world wants to hear. So I'm constantly inspired by just what I read and getting to work with great authors in Scotland and throughout the UK.
What was starting to happen in Scottish literature was it was becoming very top heavy. Most of it was controlled by big London publishers for whom Scotland wasn't really on the radar. You know, they published Scottish authors, and certainly in the wake of Trainspotting in the late 90s there was a whole wave of Scottish writers that came through. But as the noughties went on, it was a bit like Scotland. You know, the more Scottish it is, the harder it is to sell. It's not going to sell in London. And the scene was starting to kind of atrophy. And it was getting harder for even really good writers to get published. And Cargo came along. They were very connected to the writing scene. They knew that the live literature stuff was really happening and there was a lot of energy there. And they not only tapped into that, but kind of came out of it as well. So they knew who all the new writers were, they knew how to get the word out there, they knew how to use live literature events, they knew how to use the music scene, how to use e-publishing, how to use social networking in a way that the big publishers just didn't. And I think that's because they were young. I think some of Mark's biggest achievements have been publishing a book called The Year of Open Doors, which was an anthology of the young generation of Scottish writers that were coming through that had never been brought together in one book before. It was edited by Rog Glass, who himself was a young writer, and it was very high quality, it was very dynamic. You know, it included people like Aidan Moffat from Arab Strap, as well as people like myself who've been around for a wee bit longer. And that was a really eye-catching collection, I think, that acted as a lightning rod for the whole generation of Scottish writers. And it also showed that things could be done at a DIY level. It was basically saying, if you've got enough energy and enough determination and you know what's happening in the scene, you can get stuff done. There doesn't have to be a lot of money ploughed into it. It's mainly about how eye-catching is your product and does it have substance and depth. And that collection of all of these things. If there's one thing that for me really showed that Mark and Cargo were doing something different, it was the night of the launch for The Year of Open Doors in Waterstones, maybe about 2 years ago. And I've been on the Scottish literary scene for a wee while now. And you go along to a lot of readings, and it's mainly people in their 40s and 50s, which is fair enough. But I turned up to that launch and it was packed, and I looked round and everybody was in their 20s. And it just seemed to have happened overnight. And I was like, where have all these young people come from? You know, they're totally new to the scene. This book and this publisher seemed to bring all these young audience members and young readers and young writers out of the air, as if from nowhere, and they've stayed there. And that is a generational shift. That's when I thought, oh, something's happening here. And that for me is indicative of how Mark and Cargo have really renewed Scottish publishing.
I'm also sick to the back teeth of reading negative media stories about young people, because young people can make such a difference, and we never see any positive stories about great achievements by young generation. And the only way we're going to do that is by being ambitious, by trying things, is trying to demonstrate that this is a generation with a lot to offer, and we're going to go out and do wonderful things.